these dudes and dudettes, they're insane. It's like kind of a full professional athlete program. They train every day. They train impact, they train muscle, they train speed, they train everything you need to become the best diver ever. But the typical profile in its head, it's the action sport junkie. People are insane.
All right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today, I'm joined by Paul Rigault, the CEO of the Døds Diving League. Paul, thanks so much for joining me all the way from Norway.
I know, happy to be here, man, and well pronounced.
Well, we talked before. I got some practice in. Right off the top, what is death diving?
The short version is freestyle diving. So you do crazy tricks from the air and then you land in a unique position that gives you a massive splash.
And so I know that there are like ancient origins for this sport. Tell me about the where this all began, because it seems as far as the content and the media that comes out of it, it is the most perfect, engaging, like short form, hype video type content of people just sending it off of, 30-foot platforms into pools and other bodies of water. But talk about how it all began.
Yeah, so you're totally right. It's about peacocking from heights. That's kind of the thing. And I think that any country in the world with a natural body of water has this kind of daredevilism where people try to do crazy stuff in the air, and we just added the magic landing, which gives a huge splash. So the sport was born in the 70s in Oslo in Norway. We were the last generation of divers doing this stuff. So it was all about picking up girls at the local community pool. And then we started organizing competitions. And then with social media, the sport it got reborn, and it got reborn for a whole new generation. So within a couple of years, it became the platform for freestyle diving. And now we're kind of focusing on becoming an Olympic sport in 2032. So it's insane.
Okay. For people who don't yet really know what we're talking about, talk about what one of your events look like, who these competitors are, how many people attend, how you actually score it and win. Imagine talking to a total novice and explaining what is the Døds Diving League.
Yes, I think you have to kind of divide it in two, because you have the competition side, which is a little bit more serious, but then you have the DNA and the culture and the energy of the event, which is very much music festival meets sports festival. So it's pyro, it's loud music, you're drinking beers, you're in the sun. It's kind of a magic day. And in Norway, the after party was equally important as the actual competition. And we actually registered the company as a culture company, because then we were allowed to drink during the events. You can't do that with a sports company. But then it started transitioning to kind of a proper league, and it became this is kind of the start of a new sport. So we started structuring a league in 2022. And then we had divers coming in from over 30 countries, started to compete in Døds diving. So it kind of started as a grassroots movement, coming from culture, having fun, challenging yourself and your friends. And then it ended up becoming a proper sport, very similar to how snowboarding blew up in the 90s.
So you talk about the snowboarding analogy, almost like snowboarding is to skiing as Døds is to the very classic buttoned up diving that you would see in the Olympics right now, where you are not looking for the biggest splash, obviously. Are there some similarities, though, where you're at the end of the day, you're sitting there and there's a group of judges and you get a score and that's what allows you to advance? Or talk about the format.
Yeah, so it's actually very similar to snowboarding. So just like a big air competition, it's about power out of the tower, and then it's the trick you do in the air, and then it's the landing. That's kind of the main thing. And then we have a fourth judge doing the steez, which is the style. So you're still going to have to keep it cool in the air. But it's all about entertainment. It's about kind of showing off what you can and own the air as long as possible. And the format is fairly easy. It's a 2-hour competition. 40 people goes over to a 20 in the quarterfinals. Those 20 goes over to a knockout round, and then you have 10 going to the finals with 5. So you have teams and individual athletes competing for the championship. And then you have the World Series. You have 5 stops, and the last stop of the season is the World Championship.
And so what's at stake? What is the prize that these people are going for? And do you have to place at a certain level in order to advance to the next tournament on the tour?
Yeah, so back in the days, it was bragging rights. So you had you were the most badass dude ever. But today it's more about getting points and getting ranking points, being able to qualify for the actual world championship. And there's a small prize purse per competition, so increasing year by year. And last year was kind of the first year where we started transitioning from kind of amateur athletes going to full professional. So we had 10 professional teams doing this, professional death divers.
Tell me more about the production behind it. I know there's a lot of pyrotechnics, a lot of fire, a lot of crazy music, a raucous crowd. What goes into that?
So I think that the kind of the old school pitch was we bring the party to the pool. So kind of all of us kind of been to a local community pool, the chlorine smell, the wet diapers, the Speedos, the quietness, that kind of awkward vibe. We kind of flip that on its head and we come in with music. We have typical pyro at the events. We have like a 8-camera production. So we have a separate content production team for social media. This year, we're having the first season, full season on ESPN2. So now it's kind of really starting to cement itself as a proper kind of next chapter of aquatic sport, like you just talked about. And it's about energy. So we're creating those moments with the spectators, with the athletes. It feels like a boiler room. So you can kind of high five the athletes when they come up from the water. And it's like gladiatorship. It's one of the most unique events I've ever been to. And I'm still amazed.
This just feels like the type of thing that when you're like an American abroad in Europe and you stumble upon an event like that just feels so like viscerally European. And I mean that in a really good way, like just so out there and fun. And I'm curious I'm sure there's no typical, this could be the wrong word. Describe what some of these divers are like. Like what is the typical profile of somebody who maybe they have maybe they're a mailman during the week, but then they're doing death diving on the weekends.
Yeah. So I think we're one of few sports that actually kind of gathers the most different kind of sports. So half of the divers comes from either freestyle diving or traditional diving, but the other half comes from snowboarding, skate, surf, parkour, BMX. So you have it all. And I think from an athlete standpoint, these dudes and dudettes, they're insane. It's like kind of a full professional athlete program. They train every day. They train impact, they train muscle, they train speed, they train everything you need to become the best diver ever. But the typical profile in its head, it's the action sport junkie. People are insane. I think the highest dots today is over 48 meters. That's going to be approximately 145 feet, just to tell you how high these people are flying. So we're not about that. We're about 33 to 43 feet. That's kind of the competition heights. But people are giving it all. It's about feeling alive. It's about challenging yourself and just like seeking that next thrill.
What are some of the injuries that people worry about doing this?
Yeah, so it's easy to think because we're called death diving in English. It's actually the most serious injury we've had since 2008 is actually a broken tailbone. So, okay, you can have broken nose, you can have eardrums, you can have ribs and stuff like that, but no serious injuries in 17 years. So I think with that comes one of the safest actually ways of doing action sport, because from 33 feet, it's limited how big of an injury you can get. But you can get a hard slam, and the spectator wants that.
So you talk about how this attracts this like hybrid adrenaline junkie athlete. Who are some of the sponsors that you guys have brought in? I'm also curious about the greater big picture monetization model for the league, but this feels like a Red Bull Monster Energy type, match made in heaven.
Yeah, no, so you totally coined it. So Monster is our lead sponsor. And we typically have the action sports sponsor from X Games and other skate arenas and snowboarding. So we have cryptocurrency, we have outdoor gear, we have, what is it called? Shades, we have kind of training brands. But I think with the sport becoming more and more mature and more professional, we also start to attract kind of more serious players wanting a window to reach a younger audience. So this year we signed our first bank, for instance.
Talk about how this translates into social media and some of the short form video, because it really is like the perfect content for that.
Yeah, so I think the thing about the sport is it's very immediate. So you get it. It's power out of the tower. You do your trick, you celebrate, you film it, you share it. So we average 17 to 20 million views organically per event, and that's just and 2/3 of that are from our athletes. So the athletes themselves, they kind of aggregate everything that we produce, and then we kind of share our official content, and it just flies. So I think that's it's a very short format friendly kind of product. But I also think that we had our debut on national TV in Norway last year, and then we actually had one-third of the viewership being under 30 for a live. That was a new record for NRK in Norway. So I think there's something interesting about the long format piece here as well, because it's a more modern take on an old school competition style. It's just the next chapter of diving.
Tell me about the process of getting on that ESPN2 agreement that you mentioned, because if you talk, I'm picturing you and your team pitching these ESPN suits on the sport that was born out of peacocking that involves doing, much cooler, but basically a gigantic belly flop off of a 45-foot platform with, fire and music and lights. And yeah, here, you guys take it, put it on your ESPN2 broadcast. How did that actually go in practice?
Yes, we were actually picked up, and you're totally right. We in the beginning we were picked up by the Ocho, so we were there with the cheap rollers and the bean bags and those crazy ninjas and the Korean, Japanese game host shows and all that stuff. But I think that was a good start, because people just that's strange. And once
don't sleep on the Ocho. We can't sleep on the Ocho. It serves a purpose.
I just think it was a good start with ESPN, because it kind of opened the window, just there's a new sport in town. And then progressively they started understanding, it's not belly flopping. It's actually kind of an action sport. It's a new take on aquatics. There are tricks. You can't compare side by side a trick from another one. It's actually about points. There's an actual league. People are going full professional into this league. So with that, we kind of revisited the Ocho, and we said, is it time? Is it time to go on ESPN2? And I think with everything happening now, with the Olympics started showing breakdancing, and Snoop Dogg started kind of hosting the Olympics and everything, people start to become more open to new sports, new energy, new demographics.
On that note, we talked about the snowboarding analogy earlier, and I'm thinking of the Snow League, Shaun White's new emerging league here. What are some of the other comps that you reference when you're telling people this is kind of like, think of it as X, but for this type of diving?
Yeah, so and I think that's an important question, because we had to decide a couple of years ago, do we want to be kind of one-off events or a circuit of events and become an influencer platform, or do we want to become an actual sport? And we quickly decided that we do want to become an actual sport, meaning that we have a start of a season, it's about getting points, and then at the end of the season you have a world champion, and then repeat the next year. And that was very important for us, because that kind of gave us structure to build a professional league with athletes starting to kind of being able to do this full time. But where we are today, we're all about reach today. So we monetize that reach through sponsorship. That's kind of the main revenue stream. And then we're building the calendar based on host city funding. So we're going to all these host city conferences, and then we propose our sport and how we can kind of market your city by this insane media machine that we come to town with. And then secondly, you start looking at more kind of conventional models with team franchising, merchandising, starting to sell tickets to the actual events. But it's a progressive sport, and I would say we're now going from grassroots to kind of early established. And then our goal is going from an event-centric business model to becoming a media platform.
Yeah, the media play makes all the sense in the world. When you go and you propose to a new city, are you telling them we're going to need a college aquatics center that is going to be the actual infrastructure for this, with some risers where people can sit and watch? And where do you place it within a city? Talk about that process, and also tell me about what some of these cities are that are on the tour.
Yeah, so you're totally right. So I think we have kind of two directions that we offer to the host city. Either you kind of use an existing diving tower with an existing pool, and then we kind of bring the party around that area. It could be an outdoor pool or an indoor pool, but you do need a spectator capacity of minimum 1,500 people, because otherwise the whole kind of media production is going to look too small. And then we have the other option, which is in-city events, where we build a scaffolding tower and we dive into a natural body of water. So that's kind of the two directions that we pitch. And the city that likes this are definitely the smaller cities, kind of wanting this kind of media circus coming to town with kind of this insane social media footprint, these crazy influencers coming to town and kind of turning everything upside down. And then little by little, we're starting to see that some of the bigger cities are starting to, oh, what's happening over there? Oh, we do maybe want an event in this city. So, but I think it's a very kind of, took us a couple of years to understand that everything starts with the calendar. So if you manage to have a host city funded event, at least you have kind of, you're going break even on the infrastructure. And then everything, that sponsorship comes on top of that. So that's the first step of starting to monetize this.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, like, I was thinking that a tier 2 or tier 3 smaller city in the US that doesn't have a pro sports team and they're looking for just crazy entertainment, you bring your kids. I mean, if I was I still would find it very entertaining right now. If I were a 12-year-old, I can't imagine. It would be the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, I've watched plenty of the videos. I can't imagine how fired up, some kids would be.
You're totally right, because and one of the most important things we do at the local host cities include the local communities. We have the diving academy the day before the competition, and we try to recruit the local hero that we push into the competition on the Saturday. They need somebody to cheer for, and if they don't have a local hero, it's never going to happen. So we're always recruiting locally. And then just as an example, last year we had our first event in Trinidad and Tobago. They had never, ever heard about this sport, and suddenly you had like 10,000 people on the beach. They love a party. So they just showed up. And then we had one day to kind of teach 5 guys how to Dutch dive, and they took it like that. And they opened up and we're like, oh, they're going to take over, man. This is insane. So this year they're expecting 15 to 20,000 people at the beach.
Gosh. And do you ever sell tickets, or is it free for the attendees so far?
Yeah, so we don't recommend selling tickets the first year, because you need the marketing power of people kind of knowing it. And then you introduce VIP seating, meaning splash zone seating. Yeah. And then you kind of extend that. And then on the second or third year, you can introduce general admissions. So
you said this whole formalization process you got going about 4 years ago, 2022. What was the biggest step change in progress during those 4 years? What was the biggest unlock or realization you guys had where you thought, okay, that we need to do 10 times more of that if we want this thing to be real? Maybe if you can picture a specific breakthrough that you guys had that stands out as something that advanced the ball on this league.
Yeah, no. So I know the moments. We had a pilot event in Austin, Texas, as a pilot for the US, which is there's a lot of interest starting to come from the US. And then we did one test event there in 22, and we came there and everybody was like, the Dutch Federation is here, they're here. We're just like, what? We're celebrities over here? So we had this event in Lake Travis, the most insane thing, from a cliff, and just with the biggest freestyle divers in the US. And after that, it just took off.
I mean, what are some of the other US cities that have been kind of knocking on the door? Because I'm picturing these classic mountain towns that are full of snowboarders and skaters. And what are some of the other ones who have been interested in potentially hosting an event? Because frankly, I didn't realize that you already had somewhat of a US footprint, or at least working on it. I thought that this was contained to Europe and Scandinavia for now.
Yeah, so the typical action sports kind of places like Lake Tahoe and Utah. So we've been to Utah. Lake Tahoe contacted us this year. One of the events we're introducing this year is in New Mexico, in Ruidoso, where Billy the Kid got shot. Never heard about the place. Now it's getting famous.
Where Billy the Kid got shot.
Yeah. And then suddenly you have Boston starting to show interest. And now we have Virginia Beach wanting to have an event at the beach. In California, we have 2 stops where they want to have an event. So I think it's very progressive. And once people start to see that, okay, it's not just a circus coming to town, it's an actual official World Championship qualifier. It's getting shown on the ESPN. It's legit. So kind of, it start to kind of become something that's for a city that wants something different than the traditional first tier sport. This is it, man. You get such a big impact during those 3 days we're in town. It's worth the while.
How did you get buy-in when you have the cold start situation? When you think again, maybe it was in 2022 or 2023. All right, we're doing our first official league event. Can people please show up? Can we make this happen? Like, that's one, it's very daunting, but two, like from a, mechanically, and how did you get it off the ground? Was this like, let's raise some friends and family money. Let's try to pre-sell a bunch of sponsorships and convince them of what this is going to look like. Like, how do you get something like that off the ground? Because that it's daunting.
Yeah, so we did have the World Championship established in Norway. So that was kind of where we got all the money from. So we had one event with like 3,500 people. That was the max at the local community pool back in Oslo. With that money, we were able to kind of start introducing a partnership with existing kind of action sport venues. So we kind of tested out the format before we kind of started raising some funds from angel and friends and families, which gave us the first kind of possibility of structuring the league. And now we're raising capital for the next transitional phase, which is kind of developing the media platform going the next 2 years ahead.
Tell me more about that, this next phase. If you're sitting here, fast forward a couple weeks or months, and you have another sum of capital in the bank, what is the vision that's going to go towards?
Yeah, and that's a $1 million question right there, because I think that kind of, I talked to Apex Capital yesterday, and they've invested in the dance league, the bowler league, and now the new golf league and stuff like that. And they said, well, the media play is an established playbook now. Everybody's kind of going for that you're going to monetize that reach in the future. But where is the real value creation? And I think there are kind of three main steps, at least for us, building this as a proper sports going ahead. And that's taking it from an event engine that's working today. It's a scalable engine, but it's resource demanding, adding a new event, new media production and all that stuff. But we have kind of a break-even model for that. Now the next phase is kind of building more reach on that model so we can start monetize that with sponsorship revenue. And once you have a massive reach, there are so many playbooks on how you want to deploy that. So instead of saying that we know what we're going to do when we grow up, we're kind of catering different opportunities. But I do think the most important thing that we do invest in is that we actually own the IP of the whole sport. So it's much more similar to UFC in a kind, because we do own the trademark for Døds. We are the World Championship, we are the federation, we own the world ranking, we own the athletes. So for us to put that more as a brand asset and start executing on that is something that's interesting in the future as well.
How did you get the trademark for Døds? Because isn't that just a category? Like, was that a challenge, or was it something that was just unclaimed and you thought, hey, let's take it? We
claimed it. We made it. It was just a thing kind of 40 guys were doing back in Oslo. So it was a small thing. And we're Døds. Google didn't know anything about Døds then.
Yeah.
We were like very early. We started kind of building trademark structure around it, taking IP and building what could be a future kind of revenue stream for us. And today we're actually very happy we did that, because that makes it possible for us to actually do anything we want, and we can do it fairly quickly. So we can work with partners, we can launch our own stuff, we produce everything in-house ourselves. So it makes it it makes it easier for us to kind of look at commercial strategies going ahead.
I know that it is a Scandinavian, headquarters. Is there a specific country, if you had to pick, or you had to narrow it down to one country, maybe in Europe, maybe elsewhere, that has the craziest adrenaline junkie extreme sport athletes? What comes to mind?
Finland. Those guys are crazy, man. Do you remember Jackass back in the days?
Of course.
The Finns made their own version of Jackass, and it was so much more hardcore. I don't know if you remember that, but the Finns are crazy. But the Norwegian, they have skill. So I think there's kind of this perfect combination in Norway. Everybody's into extreme sports. But we had our first event in France last year, diving out of bat caves into a river. That was one of the most insane events we've ever done. And the level of the French dudes and dudettes, oh my God, they're gonna reign in this coming years. I think it's a very French thing. They're very kind of. I remember this with speed skiing. Everything that's very action is very French friendly. But again, the US has become, in the last 2 years, the US has become by far the biggest market, both from the athlete side and from the spectators.
Tell me a little bit more about what makes these Finnish divers so crazy.
They're so quiet. They don't, like, everything is in their head. And you have the same thing in Norway. If you go up north, you can sit with your family and be quiet for 4 hours. And it's not awkward. You just like sit there and just like, okay. And that does something to you, man. That's not a good thing, man. You need to talk it out. Hug it out.
Yeah. No, seriously. All right. Well, kind of in closing here, if somebody wants to go to one of these events, tell me about the most near-term stops on the tour. Maybe where's the most progress in the American expansion? I don't think I have too many international listeners at this point, but I want to know where's this thing going next, and also, obviously, best of luck with the next phase on post-raise, but start with that.
Yeah, so I think so in 27 we will introduce a collegiate tour. So starting to tapping into all the existing diving clubs in the US, making it easier to kind of transition over to the professional leagues. But the official Døds Diving League World Tour this year will start in Tobago, 15,000 people on the beach on May 23rd. Then we're going to Ruidoso, New Mexico, and then we're going to Lyon in France, and then we're going to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and then we have 2 stops in Norway, ending the World Championship in Arendal in the south of Norway, the most epic of all destinations. It's so beautiful there.
Is there not maybe I'm sure you've considered this, instead of just pitching to the cities themselves, you talk about the collegiate tour, pitching on a university by university basis? Because you could go nuts in the US. That, like, having gone to Stanford, the Avery Aquatic Center is this amazing facility that they have with so many good aquatic sports at Stanford: swimming, diving, water polo. And like water polo games there, they went to the NCAA championship multiple times. So fun, and thousands of seats. And like that alone, you could bring in a whole town of somewhere like Palo Alto, and all of the undergrads would totally go to something like that and make a party out of it. You're telling college kids, come to this extreme sporting event on your campus. There's booze, there's music, there's fire. It's going to be unbelievably fun. That's kind of a no-brainer. And it's free for now. That's kind of a no-brainer.
No, you're totally right. So that's what we're tapping into in 27. Okay. And you already have the rivalry. You already have the fans. The clubs are already established. People like to party there. So you're exactly right. So building it as a regional conference where you kind of tap into that rivalry, that's the plan in 27.
Yeah, you can imagine a college tour just dominating. All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for the time. I really enjoyed learning about this. I can't say I knew anything about Døds diving before doing the bit of research before having this conversation. So thank you for the education, and best of luck going forward.
No, thank you so much, Brett.